Hi, my name is Rehan Balaporia, and I'll be reading out excerpts from the book Freeing Madam X. Dave was a powerful man. His father owned the mining operations that provided jobs for this town, and so nobody dared to cross him. Dave knew this, and so he liked to parade me around, making me wear what his heart desired, mostly the skimpiest clothes he could find, just to rub in everyone's face that he had a trophy that they couldn't have. I didn't particularly enjoy this, but it was Dave. I couldn't let him down. Every time I wondered why I was here, I remembered the kind man who had spotted me in my hometown, crying alone in a bar. He had whisked me away to a new life, where I could escape the tyranny of my father and the murkiness of my past. I lived in a mansion, wanted for nothing, and was the envy of all the women in town. So, if he asked me for a few little things to make him happy, what was so wrong in that? There was nothing wrong in that. But there was a little voice that asked if there was anything wrong in wanting to feel wanted, in wanting to be pleasured until I had a riotous climax, in wanting to be admired by a stranger's lustful eyes. Wait, somebody was admiring me. From the corner booth of the pub, a man was staring at me. His eyes were locked on me tight, and even from across the room, I could feel the intensity of his gaze burning into my very skin. An involuntary shudder spread through me as the burning spread down to my thighs. I had never seen this man before. It wasn't that big a town, and I'm sure I would have noticed someone looking like that before. When I caught his eye, he didn't avert his gaze or turn away, but instead sat there contemplating with a frown. I felt like he was undressing me, but not in the way men do, imagining what was beneath your clothes. It felt like he was trying to look into me. "What are you looking at?" Dave asked sharply, bringing me out of my reverie. I shook my head, and Dave turned around, following my previous line of vision. But the man wasn't there. He was making his way over to our table. I got a better look at him now. He was tall, with a casual white t-shirt and jeans that hung loosely off his lean body. His brow was furrowed over soft brown eyes, like he was figuring out how to solve a problem in his head. He ran thin, delicate fingers through his black hair, and I had an image of those fingers inside me. Read the complete story on the Saga Fiction app. Download now from the Google Play Store. Hi, I'm Rehan Balaporia, and I'll be reading out excerpts from the book Freeing Madam X. But I have to ask then, why not just use photographs? Why bother painting something that you can easily acquire in real life? Shania asked. "Ah," sighed Raphael dramatically, shaking his head. "This is the problem." He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Shania, can I ask you to do something for me?" I nodded, intrigued. "I want you to close your eyes for me." I raised an eyebrow, but he urged me, "Please, go on." I closed my eyes. "I want you to take a second and imagine your perfect lover. Imagine them standing in front of you, dressed up, all glamorous, just ready for you to do whatever you desire with them." I tried to conjure up an image of Dave, but Raphael, in his powder blue suit, popped up in my mind and stayed there. He acted in accordance with the words that the real Raphael was speaking. "Now, Shania, I'm going to ask you a question. Don't open your eyes, don't say anything yet, just nod or shake your head for me. If this person was in front of you and you had all the possibilities of the world ready to go, would you simply pull their zipper down, hike up your dress, and fuck them?" I imagined Raphael pulling his zipper down at that moment, hiking up my dress, and shoving his dick into me right there and then. Oh, it was extraordinary. But incomplete. I shook my head. That's right, because it's too rushed. It's not everything you would want. So tell me, Shania, what would you want to do? I gulped and moistened my suddenly dry lips. There were people watching, but I couldn't think of them. All that was real was me and both versions of Raphael. I would ask him to take off his clothes, slowly, like it was a show. I would want him to flaunt every part of his body, reminding me that it was all for me. And once he was done, I would make him watch me take my clothes off, as slow as he did. I would watch as his eyes trailed across my skin, his eyes hooded by lust as his dick rose for me, as his face twisted in arousal for all the desire he had for me. But I wouldn't let him touch me yet. No, he would touch me when I was done, when I wanted him to. Till then, he would watch and stroke himself. And while he jerked himself off like this, he would describe every single dirty thing he wanted to do to me. Someone cleared their throat. Startled, I opened my eyes to see Raphael smiling smugly at me. For a second, the naked Raphael in my vision was superimposed on the real one. But then, the real Raphael in his powder blue suit was back. It was a good thing that I had not foregone the panties like I had in my dream, because right now, I was aroused. The wetness drenched my panties, and the blood rushed over my heated body. With a start, I realized that I had said everything aloud to a crowd of spectators, and I turned to look at scandalized, uncomfortable, and even aroused faces. Mr. Compton was impassive as usual, but Dave looked furious, holding a glass so tight it was a surprise it hadn't shattered. And that, Raphael said, interrupting my observations, is something you will never get from a journalist. I sat up straight, cleared my throat, and tried to regain my composure. And why did you make me do that exercise? That exercise was to help illustrate the answer to my question. Why do I spend so much time painting? It's because the work of painting, like sex, takes time. It is effort and attention to detail. It cannot and should not be rushed, or else the work will be substandard. I put great care into my paintings, like I put into sex. Read the complete story on the Saga Fiction app. Download now from the Google Play Store. Hi, I'm Rehan Balaporia, and I'll be reading out excerpts from the book Freeing Madam X. Together, we lay down on the soft grass and stared up at the sky, the blue fading as the sun began its downward descent. My father was an alcoholic, I said abruptly, saying the words in a rush before I could stop myself. My parents were immigrants, and my father was very vocal about the fact that he hadn't wanted to come here. But his family and my mother had high expectations of him, and so he did. And he hates it here. He compares every aspect of existence to the place of his birth. And of course, they had expectations of me. All the burden of living up to this grand promise of the future fell on me, and I couldn't fulfill it. Why? I wasn't what they wanted me to be. I never shared their grand ambitions. I wasn't desperate to fulfill their wishes. And so my father, having very early on in my life decided that I was a disappointment, turned to drink. Did he hurt you? Raphael whispered, his hold on my hand tightening. Yes, I whispered. I remember I said something about how I was enjoying my new school, how I was having so much fun playing with the other children, and I teared up slightly. He slapped me right across the face then, for having fun. He said that I was becoming one of them, that I was going to be a painted whore like my mother who led men astray. I was 8 years old then, Raphael. Raphael squeezed my hand tighter. I never enjoyed school after that. I feel too guilty to do so. I'm so sorry, Shania, Raphael said quietly, his voice sounding genuinely distraught. I had no place in the world, neither at home nor outside it. Each place reminded me only of my differences. Home became a terrible place to be in, and I don't know if I've ever really felt comfortable or safe. I turned to him. Until you. Raphael turned in the grass to look over me and wiped the tears from my eyes, and then began to stroke my hair. I'm a cliché, I know, I said, suddenly very ashamed of what I was saying. Clichés exist because people often share similar experiences. It doesn't make those experiences less meaningful. I nod slowly, rubbing my head against the grass. I don't think I've ever told anyone that. Dave knows, I think, but he's never actually talked to me about it. Does Dave talk to you about anything of significance? No, I said, admitting it as much to him as myself. Then he left the question unasked. I'm with him because he took me away from that life. And no matter how he treats me, at least he wants me. I know that he'll want me there and that he'll want to be with me. It's better than the alternative. It's better than going back. He didn't say anything. Instead, he turned back to look at the sky. We lay there quietly for a while, like teenagers holding hands on the grass, enjoying just being in that moment with each other. 2 years ago, he started, and I couldn't see his face while he was saying this, but his voice was sad, sadder than I had ever heard it. I was married. What? I asked, startled at this sudden change of topic, my head whipping to the side to look in his direction. I wanted to get up and look at him, but he pressed my hand and I stayed down. What happened? I asked, softer this time. She died, he said, his voice full of a familiar anguish, one that he had lived through many times. It was suicide. She had been depressed for many years before that, and I never stopped pushing her. I always believed that I could save her or something, that I could somehow stop her feeling what she had always felt. He sat up and turned to me. I did the same. His eyes were shining with tears. That suit I wore at the show. It was what I was wearing when she died. That's why when I had the cross on it, as a reminder that my heart was forever scarred. And now, his voice grew softer. When I look at you, I feel the same. I want to help you. I look at you and so desperately want you to be happy. But she taught me that I can't do anything unless you want me to. Read the complete story on the Saga Fiction app. Download now from the Google Play Store. Hi, I'm Rehan Balaporia, and I'll be reading out excerpts from the book Freeing Madam X. He lay there in a white hospital gown, covered in white sheets, looking pale as if all life had left him. I almost crumpled with grief, right there and then. I bent down and took his hand, careful not to disturb the ivy. It was ice cold and devoid of the warmth that I was so used to. Tears formed in my eyes as I recalled all the harrowing events of the night, and they splashed onto his hand. There was no movement in his hands, no flicker of light in his face. He just lay there, still and unmoving as the grave, the beeping of the machine the only sign that he was still alive. I sobbed harder and clutched his hand tight, wanting more than anything for his long fingers to move again in mine. I visited Raphael every day for the next 2 weeks. I went after work, no matter how late it became, and I made sure to tell him all about my day. I looked at him for signs of life, for a stray movement, for a flutter of the eyelids. But there was nothing. He just lay there, blank and unmoving. 2.5 weeks after his injury, I just couldn't take it anymore. After a grueling week of work, I was so incredibly exhausted. I couldn't talk to him anymore. I couldn't pretend like he was even hearing me. I couldn't do any of that. I sat there that night, clutching his hands, and just sobbed and sobbed, begging him to wake up. Read the complete story on the Saga Fiction app. Download now from the Google Play Store.